This is the new Isuzu Rodeo. It's also sold as the Honda Passport.
Well, this is not good. I mean, this is a lot of damage. Major intrusion then in the foot area.
Inside the Isuzu, the footrest has been driven back 15 inches, the most of any.
Let's see what happened to the leg.
And at the computer, the dummy readings are not good. As you watch the slow motion, remember the Isuzu is traveling the same speed as the others, 40 miles an hour.
Look at how much damage there is. It's collapsing. It's actually totally collapsing.
How badly is this dummy hurt?
At a minimum, very serious leg injuries, fractures, probably multiple fractures.
And there's another test. This is the Chevy Blazer.
It looks pretty bad. There's a lot of intrusion in the footwell area.
The footrest has been driven back 13 inches. But in a test where broken legs are usually the most serious injuries, there is concern about this dummy's head.
Major problems in this test. You will see how much violent movement there is. The dummy's actually looking back up at you.
Remember, you're watching this car at 40 miles an hour.
The dummy goes into the airbag, comes back, hits that window frame so hard there's a dent left. That is all happening because the structure around the dummy is collapsing.
Although the computer readings indicate no serious injuries to the chest or legs and no life-threatening injury to the head, O'Neill says the dummy's head hit hard enough to cause a concussion.
We have not seen bad head injury results like this vehicle in any of the other vehicles.
If you have never seen this before on another car or four-wheel drive vehicle, is it possible that it's just a fluke?
It's never a fluke in a crash test when a dummy records high measurements. The structural collapse of this vehicle will happen over and over again. It's a function of the design. The precise movement of the dummy may not be repeatable, but if you run this test over and over again, the structure will collapse in similar manners.
But automakers, citing this report for Congress, say one test may not be enough to really judge a car. The Insurance Institute counters that it tests the same way the government does, one test for each vehicle model. Every manufacturer declined to be interviewed, but they all wrote letters defending their four-wheel drive, saying the test was too fast. The results were misleading because they ignore real-world crash data. And they all say they have been working hard to improve safety. Ford even sent this video showing the Explorer in a similar but slower crash test where the door stayed closed. Ford says it's never popped open before in a test. Dateline asked General Motors to release any films of any offset tests it had done on the Blazer. GM declined, but sent this letter saying, "It's important to consider a broad range of accident modes, not a single test. That redesigning cars to improve leg protection could have negative consequences for the protection of the head and chest. And that even in this test, the injury readings were all within the allowable government standards."
GM also criticized the Insurance Institute for its, quote, stage crashes. And it criticized Dateline for helping the Institute to select, quote, the best camera angles to achieve a dramatic pictorial effect.
In fact, before Dateline was invited to watch the tests, the Institute had already established its test procedure, including the number of cameras, their position, and what they would shoot. Only then did we set up our own cameras. The Institute invited not only Dateline, but manufacturers to observe, and met with them about test procedures and the results.
These tests, in my opinion, are misleading to the public because they don't relate to the real world.
George Parker represents the International Association of Automobile Manufacturers.
For injury, for damage, and for fatalities, these vehicles have a better record than other vehicles on the road.
Parker and the automakers point to the insurance industry's own statistics, which show overall four-wheel drives fare better than average in real-world accidents.
These are large, heavy vehicles. They're most likely crash partners, something lighter and smaller.
Most people think that if you have a rough, tough, heavy vehicle, that you'll be safer. True or false?
Only parts of that are true. Rough and tough do not equal safety.
The Institute agrees that in a head-on crash between two cars, a heavier vehicle usually does have an advantage. But O'Neill says these tests show that in some accidents, like hitting a tree or a concrete barrier, a heavy four-wheel drive may actually offer less protection.
Our top-rated passenger cars would fare better than this group of utility vehicles.
Even though these four-wheel drives are heavier.
Weight makes no difference when you're running into something rigid.
But the car makers say most accidents involve two vehicles colliding. Even so, the Insurance Institute wonders why car makers can't build four-wheel drives to protect passengers in both full frontal and offset tests. And why one four-wheel drive can look like this, while another one looks like this in the same test. Should the government require all vehicles to pass both tests, especially when the automakers have already proven they can build cars that do well? Last year, the Institute gave the Chevy Lumina, the Ford Taurus, and the Volvo 850 good ratings. But this year it says none of the four-wheel drives deserve high marks. Tomorrow, the Insurance Institute will release its rankings, factoring in how the four-wheel drives did in the offset test and how they performed in the government's full frontal test. The Insurance Institute rates three of them as acceptable: the Toyota 4Runner, the Land Rover Discovery, and the Ford Explorer. One is rated marginal, the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the Institute rates these four-wheel drives as poor: the Isuzu Rodeo, also sold as the Honda Passport, and the Chevy Blazer, also sold as the GMC Jimmy and the Oldsmobile Bravada. The auto industry disputes those evaluations.
I think they ought to look at the real-world experience of these vehicles, which is very good. And knowing that, that's more important. There's thousands of crashes, millions of miles, millions of vehicles against 6 crash tests.
And this reminder, a point on which the insurance industry and the car companies agree. And every test, the injuries could have been much worse without seatbelts and airbags.
The Insurance Institute says 2 other popular four-wheel drives, the Nissan Pathfinder and the Mitsubishi Montero, were totally redesigned for 1996 and hit the showrooms too late to be included in this round of crash tests. But the Institute does plan to test them later this year, and we'll tell you how they do here on Dateline.